Okay, hi everybody. You know what? I'm thinking that this is probably going to go on longer than the 3 weeks we had planned. Um, of prime concern right now is that my salon is closed, which means in a couple weeks my roots are going to start showing and it's not going to be pretty. So I thought, you know what? I think I'll videotape ahead of time. Um, while I can still stand and look at me in the camera. Okay, and the sad part is because you're going to be able to see my part, you'll get increasingly more aware of this fact. So I thought, you know what, let's just do this now. So I'm going to look at chapter 8. We have chapter 8 this week, and then we have chapter 8 the week after the vacation or spring break. Now, one of the things I have been thinking about is your case presentations. We would normally do those in class. I'll probably have you do a video of yourself on your phone and have you upload it to me. So we all won't get to see each other's case plan, but at least you'll be able to, send it to me. All right. And that includes, I think, no, actually, you did your narrative with the ASAM, so you're good. And the same thing with special populations. You're going to need to just send me yours if we are not in class by then. And I won't be able to make a booklet, but at least right now, because Reprographics is closed. But as soon as the booklet is done, I'll be able to let you know, okay? So, but let's go ahead and start chapter 8. And one of the things that we're looking at with this is the idea of screening to discharge. And it's true that your text points out that very often we have kept those two things separate. We've kept counseling and case management as separate. In fact, it's even separate in the 12 core functions. But the truth is, and we've alluded to this, there is a lot of counseling that goes into effective case management. In fact, you can't really be good at case management without having some counseling skills. The capacity to do active listening, to reframe, to make sure that you're clear, even giving summaries. So a lot of the skills that you would have to learn to do individual counseling and even group counseling will be handy to you, okay? So part of looking at, in fact, communication skills, talking about clients' feelings, looking at the kind of goal setting that we look at for individual counseling is also going to happen in case management. In fact, it's particularly important in case management because we're trying to link their goals with specific services, okay? So the first topic covered here in 8 is screening. Also, human services involve screening, which lets us know whether or not somebody is appropriate for our services. Things like attesting to the presence of a condition that may go unrecognized if not detected. And what that means is we're screening to make sure that people actually have the disorder we treat. In our case, we're screening for whether or not they require addiction medicine services, right? So is this person in fact an alcoholic or addict? And if so, what level of care do they need? So the other thing that we're increasingly going to be adding is additional screening in terms of mental health symptoms and whether or not somebody might need a referral or ongoing care for a mental health disorder. The other thing is screening provides data to decide whether they're appropriate for our program. So the issue is not just, are you appropriate for addiction treatment, but are you really a fit for our particular addiction treatment program? Do you have special needs? Are you the right gender? Are you the right age? Do you have the right, do you need transportation? What is it that you need? So we look at, in the screening phase, we look at health, criminal justice. We have to decide whether there's evidence of a referral. And so one of the things we have to do is identify people with particular issue, which is known as, in your book, in healthcare settings, as case finding. Okay, so substance use disorder units at a medical center can work with emergency room. That is one of the places you'll see what's called SBIRT screening. And I'll put a little video and some information about SBIRT because SBIRT is actually now being trained or utilized, in emergency rooms and in primary care. Primary care docs, as part of looking at whole person care, are going to be trained to use the SBIRT. And that's a simple screening questionnaire to with all of their clients to figure out, is there a disorder here? And the reason that's important is because, again, addiction medicine or addiction issues is an often overlooked area. For example, in the emergency room, they'll fix up your broken arm that you got climbing the ladder drunk, but not deal with the fact you were drunk when you were climbing the ladder. So it's kind of a groovy thing that we're starting to integrate that, at least in Santa Clara County, is part of how we're doing medical care. Okay? So the other issue is whether, again, are they appropriate and are their symptoms matching what it is we actually do? For example, if they're a veteran, are they utilizing their veteran benefits? Right? Instead of treating them, maybe I can refer them over to the VA, where then they are eligible for a lot of different benefits, not just substance abuse disorder treatment. The other thing is getting them connected with ability to pay, which in our case means we may need to connect them with Drug Medi-Cal and get them signed up for Drug Medi-Cal services, food services, food stamps. There's a lot of different things we could potentially connect them with if we can screen them appropriately. All right. So the next level they talk about is engaging. So in addition to gathering information, we're going to be taking a look at looking at rapport. Remember that for many clients, the initial screening is their very first introduction to addiction treatment. So the first impression they have when you attempt to engage with them is going to be a lasting impression. So is the impression they're going to take away that you're busy, preoccupied, doing, they're one more task that you need to do, or are you going to be able to sort of focus and in that period of time, even if it's on the phone, giving them 100% of your attention. The way you speak to them, the amount of dignity you accord them is going to lay a foundation for how they feel or how much trust they feel in the treatment that I'm going to be offering, right? Do they feel like, these people actually care about me? They care about me as an individual, and I'm not just a case number that they're kind of, running, doing to get the paperwork done, okay? The other thing they talk about is the boundary of clients and counselors. So part of the other thing you're doing in engaging clients is becoming clear about the role. And in a lot of times, it could be that you're, if somebody's passed the screening and they're coming in, you're going to be doing the initial intake. You may or may not be their counselor. You may be just the intake worker. But if you're the intake worker, you need to be clear about what that entails, meaning that you will not be following through with their counseling. If you are going to be the counselor, you're going to need to be clear about what that entails. So they kind of need to know what their role is, right, and what your role is. And the other thing is look about talking about a client's expectations and desired for outcome, right? What do they want? And we've talked about this with motivational interviewing. We've talked about this in stages of change. I cannot emphasize this enough, that effective treatment matches client's desired outcome. I could give you the most marvelous treatment plan, but if it does not match what it is you want, it will be completely ineffective. So you need to spend a lot of time paying attention to what it is the person says they want. And that'll get more clear as time goes by, as they become more clear. All right, so you're going to be circling back to that over and over again. What is it that this person needs and wants? And then the other piece of initially the intake is describing, here's what we do, here's what the expectations are, here's our daily schedule, the way you prove that you're actually engaged and you're benefiting from treatment has to do with your participation, your ability to complete your treatment plan, your willingness to attend meetings on time and to participate when you're there. So sort of letting people know how to do treatment, particularly if it's their first rodeo. They really might not be sure what it is they're supposed to be doing. So it's important to note that, again, you're the first person they see if you're doing screening or intake, and so it's really important that you are, again, communicating to them that you hear them, their needs matter, their individual needs matter. All right, so then your book moves to screening and taking a look at screening tools, and they mentioned several here, and I'm going to put those as part of your um, uh, things you can review in your module. And in fact, what I may have you do, in fact, I think I'll have you do, is practice a couple of these on some willing guinea pig in your world. This will give you a way to kind of actually, I think a lot of us learn better by doing. I know I do. So they talk about in here the audit, the mast, the cage. In the cage interview, you simply ask these 4 questions, and actually, these are very similar to the experts. So, see if you ever thought you ought to cut down on your drinking. Have people annoyed you by criticizing your drinking? Have you ever felt guilty about your drinking? And have you ever had an eye opener or basically used to be able to function in the morning? So any positive response involves continued conversation, okay? And in fact, the screening then would then refer them for an assessment. Like if they said yes to those things, any of those things, okay, we might need to do a more in-depth assessment. They also put an interesting one here, a halt bump. I've never seen this one before, which I think is interesting. Do you usually use drugs and drinks to get high? Do you sometimes drink or use drugs alone? Have you ever found yourself looking forward to drinking or drugs? Have you ever noticed an increase in tolerance to alcohol and drugs? Do you have any memory lapses, blackouts that occur during drinking? Do you find yourself using drugs or drinking in an unplanned way? Do you drink or use when you feel anxious, stressed, or depressed for medication reasons, medicinal reasons? And then do you work at protecting your supply? I've never seen that in a screening, but I think it's a marvelous question because I think there is a certain amount of energy, any of you who've ever been addicted know, in keeping our supply available to us. We'll go to great lengths to make sure we have access to what we need when we think we need it. In fact, we usually have extra just in case. It's like I was talking to a client the other day, and her husband broke his vape pen. And so when they went to buy a new vape pen, he wanted to buy 2 vape pens because in case that ever happens again, he never wants to be without a vape pen. So now he needs a backup vape pen. So that is so us. That's how we roll. Okay. So the idea is they give you on figures 8.1 and 8.2, again, some screening tools. These are, have you ever done something crazy while high and had to make excuses for your behavior later? Love it. Have you ever felt really burnout for a day after using drugs? Have you ever been really, have you ever gotten out of bed in the morning and felt really wasted? Did you ever get high in school, right, while you're in school? Have you gotten into a fight while you were high, including drinking? This is a common time for people to get into bar fights with their families. Do you think about getting high a lot of the time? Have you ever thought about committing suicide when you were high? Again, the rate of suicide goes up by 6 times. If you're drunk, we're more likely to complete a suicide attempt while loaded. Have you ever run away from home because of an argument about drug or alcohol use? Did you ever try to stick to one drug after a bad experience mixing drugs? Again, this is common. It's like, shit, I really need to avoid meth, but I should probably stick to weed. I have a friend that says that, I really shouldn't drink hard liquor because I get into bar fights. I better stick to beer. There you go. Have you ever been suspended because of something you did while you were high? And as an adult, you could say you ever been, sent home from work or, again, been suspended from work because of the way you used equipment or the way you talked to coworkers because you were loaded. Did you ever have a beer, some booze to get over a hangover? Do you usually keep a supply for emergencies? Again, that extra vape pen, so you have your extra little stashes hidden around. Have you ever smoked some pot to get over a hangover? Yeah, particularly the nausea. I think a lot of people smoke weed because they feel sort of sick and they want to eat. Have you ever felt nervous or cranky if you stopped using, meaning withdrawal? These are great questions. I love them. Absolutely love them. And I think that they are more reality-based questions. I think they're questions people can relate to. you know. So yeah, I could see giving this to people. In fact, maybe I will because I love the language of it. I actually really do. What do they call this one? Yeah, just examples of screening, but I actually like this one a lot because they're pretty. Yeah, if you've had some of those, right? Because some of the others, like, have you ever, kind of like in my pre-contemplation when I said, have you ever given up any social things? And the guy and my little client said, no, I used to be social, right? So there's some of these, the languaging's pretty clear. Okay, so yeah, we'll go over some of those screening tools, and I'll create a little assignments you can practice because I think it's a useful exercise. Um, they have another one here, screening adults for alcohol use. Do you ever feel you're a normal drinker, meaning that you drink less than most people? Do other people worry about your drinking? Do you ever feel guilty? Do your friends or relatives think you're a normal drinker? Are you able to stop drinking? You ever attended AA? Ever drinking ever created problems with your relatives or wife? Gotten in trouble at work? Neglected your obligations? These are closer to the DSM questions, right? Yeah, these are definitely, and that's because it's the SMART, or it's the short version of the SMART. Um, okay, again, these are all valuable. The cage one is fast. Again, this other one they could fill out in a waiting room because it's got yes or no, simple yes or no. Okay, what I like about yes or no is they don't have to write a lot of details, but it allows us to then have a conversation. All right, so this is on page 152. All right, once we've gone through that, it is now time to take a little peekaroo at assessment. And we've been doing that one. We've been spending a lot of time on our ASAM. You guys have been doing a good job taking a look at that material. When we think about skills, tools that function, the whole point of an ASAM really, or an assessment, is to create a treatment plan. Okay, you guys turned in your treatment plans hopefully last week. But the idea is the fact it is part of case management. And it's not separate because all of these things tell us in case management, what is it that I'm going to need to add, or what service am I going to need to find or get a hold of that's going to be of assistance to them in their treatment plan as I'm gathering this data. So remember this, we're doing the ASAM, or we're doing screening, we're doing it from a case management perspective in this chapter, which is I'm listening for things I may need to go out and include in what we're doing. So they do have the 6 purposes for evaluation of clients here on page 154. Screening, whether they need further evaluation, diagnosis to determine if the criteria are met, right, for diagnosis, ongoing evaluation, what's the nature and extent of the problem, what's their motivation, where's their stage of change, what's going on with treatment planning, so what kind of interventions and services do they need then, and then follow up, what kind of services are they going to need after that. So again, our whole mind frame as we're going through intake and a screening and assessment is, what does this person need, and what can our treatment program provide, right? What's a match? What's not a match? So in my head, I need to already be thinking about referral and consultation, okay? They do mention that you do have to have orientation to treatment for this when we look at intake, because that's the next one. After assessment is intake. This is where we're looking at the formal paperwork that includes confidentiality. It's like, when is a client a client? A client's not a client until the client is been entered into the program. So you could still screen on the phone and it's still not your client yet. By the time you're doing assessment, you're doing an ASAM, they're a client. And I would argue intake comes before assessment. In most treatment programs, we've done the paperwork, we've done the confidentiality referrals before we ever do assessment, because assessment, as you know from doing your ASAM, is actually more in depth than just a screening. Okay, we get much more personal information. But one of the things that we're going to get, and now your book takes a look at the DSM, is we're going to make sure that the person, again, in our assessment, we're going through the stages of change. We're taking a look at the 6 dimensions, which include the DSM, because if you remember the paperwork I gave you, you take a look at that. You make sure that this person is, in fact, an alcoholic or addict that needs your level of care. Okay? So if they're mild to moderate, they should not be in residential. I don't care what the judge says. They're not supposed to be there. It's the wrong level of care. Here's the thing. If I take somebody who's mild to moderate and I put them in residential, it's not going to match who they are, and so they're going to conclude treatment's not for me. It's not that treatment's not for you. It's this level of care is not for you. Vice versa. If I've got somebody that needs residential and I put them in outpatient, again, it's not going to work. They're going to keep using, and so they're going to say, treatment's not for me. It doesn't work. It's not that treatment doesn't work. It's you're in the wrong level of care. Okay? So it's not just, are you an alcoholic or addict? Most people, by the time they're referred to us, probably. But what level of care do you need to be most effective? Okay, and remember, we've talked about the confusion we can have, which is I can see a level of care you need. However, your insurance provider will only pay for this, like Kaiser, or other types of insurance that say, or the county even, managed care, right? You need to go to outpatient first. Even though I can see you need residential, I may have to start you at a level of care that is not going to work. And so all I can do is prepare you for that and say, you know, here's what I'm seeing, but here's what I'm thinking we're probably going to need to do. And so I'm going to go ahead and start you there. But if you run into trouble, and you might, it's okay. Let your counselor know, because we can move you up to partial day. We can even move you up to residential. Okay, so you sort of let them know that they're going to start here, but it's okay if they run into trouble. Okay, don't make that sound like, oh, here's what you need, when you know they probably need something else. Okay, it may be that unfortunately they're going to have to do those other hoops first, okay, which is a failing, I think, in our system, but that may be how it is. But at least the client knows that, oh, okay, if outpatient didn't work, it's not because treatment doesn't work, okay? It's because maybe I need something additionally. Same thing with mental health. If in your ASAM and you discover, you know what, this person has mental health concerns, we need to let them know that, you know, for treatment to be effective, we're going to also need to address this mental health concern. Because if we don't, treatment may not work, and you may come to the conclusion that treatment doesn't work. It's not that it doesn't work. It's that we need to make sure that the components you need to be successful are put into place. So part of my case management role here is to make sure that you're connected with the services you need, whether it's medical or it's mental health, to make sure that we put these things into place to help you be the most successful you possibly can be. Okay? So I'm hoping that that has made sense to you. Okay? And your book does go into assessment of readiness to change. And they do talk about the SASE, the audits. It's interesting that they don't talk about the ASAM, because again, that's the one that SAMHSA recommends. But they do talk about biopsychosocial assessment, and the idea that, you know, when you're assessing somebody, you're assessing, again, the whole person. That's why we do all 6 dimensions, right? It's why we do the DSM-5. And so they talk about the components of the activities that are going to help us figure out what's going on. And there's some basic components you need for a full psychosocial assessment. Things like their childhood and adolescent history with other people, relationships with them, family history of drug and alcohol use, trying to get more clarification around that. Okay? Their own history of substance use. Okay, we need to kind of figure out what's been happening with them, and you have your little chart, you know, that I gave you that you can do with them regarding each drug, right? In terms of each drug of choice, what's their history of use, what age did they start, if they stopped, why, how much were they using, taking a look at their any current health and medical problems. We know that to be number 2, right? ASAM Dimension 2. Their mental health history, that has to do with Dimension 3. Family and social functioning is also dimension 3, right? What kind of activities have affected them? Do they have any family history of violence? Um, Employment, education, and recreation. This one is not as well emphasized. It's more emphasized on the ASI. The ASI is the screening tool that criminal justice uses. We use the ASAM. The ASI does a better job with this, with tracking vocational impact of using, more specifically. So it may be that you're going to have to ask that. You may have to add that into your evaluation because the ASAM makes references to have your job and impacted, but it may not be significant enough. So you may have to throw that in. Their sexual history again. That's a level 3 area. It's not as well outlined in the ASAM. You may have to ask some more about that. And their finances, again, the ASI does a better job with this. We may have to ask them questions about, what's the financial impact of your alcohol and drug use. It kind of goes with their work history. It goes with their criminal justice history. It all kind of goes there, but it's important to call it out. That, yeah, there's a financial impact of spending all your money on meth, right? Or losing your jobs because you keep not showing up because you're drunk. And then again, legal issues, making sure that we've asked enough questions about that. Okay? And then the assessment of severity. And finally, they mention the ASAM, okay, where they do the placement criteria, which tells about, level of care and severity of care. So they do mention the ASAM. Again, the ASI does a better job with some of these other areas like vocational and employment and finances. But we can mix and match. We can bring in that stuff. We just have to remember to do it because the ASAM isn't necessarily going to trigger us to do it because it's looking at severity and placement better than the ASI, which is why we use the ASAM. ASI isn't necessarily going to tell us anything about level of care or stage of change, but it does fill in some of that biopsychosocial issues that maybe the ASAM doesn't. So really, the best of all worlds is a kind of a combo platter, okay? All right, I'm going to stop there, and then I'm going to pick this up after your vacation and finish this chapter. Again, I'll be including a little assignment. You can do a little assessment thing that I would have had you do in class for screening, and watch the videos, and I will look forward to seeing you after spring break. Okay, bye-bye.